If you think this is the M12 Nibbler on steroids, well, you're wrong, kinda. We've got the brand new Milwaukee 10-gauge Nibbler. So that's more than an 1/8 inch of mild steel and quite close to that on stainless steel. We may even push it past its limits just a bit. But anyway, we're going to try out this thing and see if it really lives up to what they're claiming. And if it does, some of you out there are probably thinking, you know what, I could really use that tool. Today, we're checking out the brand new Milwaukee model number 3476. And it's their M18 FUEL 10-gauge Nibbler. So we reviewed the 12-gauge, not the 12-gauge, the M12 FUEL Nibbler a couple of years ago, and it's been a great tool for your light sheet metal work, your roofers, stuff like that. But obviously there's limitations on both the being 12 volt, the power to cut through things, as well as the head on that is just a small head, and the nibbling action's not going to do the thicker stuff. So now we've got its way bigger brother, and this guy is, I'm reluctant to say a beast, but it's a beast. It's a big old boy here. This is, I believe, more than 1 inch, and we'll check that out with some calipers here in a couple of moments. It does have a bag to catch the chips, so I'm excited about that, even though it's on a larger platform. But this thing weighs in pretty heavy, as well as a pretty big boy. So I would say kind of the size of one of their full-size M18 FUEL grinder, one of the like 6-inch grinders, is probably what it's kind of in relation to. You get 4 different modes or 4 different speeds on this, and all the way up to 1200 SPM or 1200 strokes per minute. And by the way, this is a 1-key tool as well. Primarily not for actually controlling the tool, but more for just, asset management, for, making sure that your tools don't walk off, being able to shut it off, things like that. But as far as the speed, you have your 4 different modes that are preset at 850, 950, 1050, and 1200 strokes per minute. So you can slow those down on those different modes with those 4 different modes. Now this comes as a bare tool as we see it right now. So it is the 3476-20. That tells us no battery. It does come with the bag, the catch bag, and with the auxiliary handle here, which by the way, you can mount here or on the opposite side as well. And also you can actually turn this head, and we'll show that here in a few moments. Also have 2 LEDs there underneath the head as well that'll call on once you pull the trigger, and we get a variable speed trigger. So even though we have the max RPM set at, or the max SPM, strokes per minute, at 1200 or down to 850 if you're in your mode 1, you can still control with a variable speed trigger how much you want to speed that up and ramp it up and slow it down, what have you. So you still have maximum control with that variable speed trigger. Also comes with a belt hook as well. If you want to utilize that, you can. I just didn't like it on there because it made it tip over and not stand up like it's doing right now. Let us know in the comments what line of work you're in if you could use a tool like this. Now, they recommend matching this with one of their high output batteries or the XC 6.0, and I think they're claiming like 96 feet of cutting or nibbling on a 6.0 battery. And by the way, 10 gauge, if you're not aware what 10 gauge is, which you probably are aware, especially if you're interested in a tool like this. This is one of those tools that you kind of know when you need it, or when it'll help you out. This is 10 gauge steel right here. And by the way, it's 10 gauge mild steel, 12 gauge stainless steel, and 9 gauge aluminum. So a little bit thicker aluminum, a little bit thinner on the stainless steel. But anyway, 10 gauge is a little bit thicker than an 1/8 inch. So here's a gauge here. It's my Miller welder gauge. You may not be able to see the laser etching there on that, depending on where the light is shining on it. But I'll just tell you, this is 10 gauge right there, and that is 1/8 inch right there. So 1/8 inch there, 10 gauge there. So 10 gauge is a little bit thicker. You can see that my 1/8 inch gauge will not fit on there. I can squeeze it right in the opening of it. I don't want to bend it. And that it fits perfect in the 10 gauge slot. So that is 10 gauge material. Again, just a little bit thicker than 1/8 inch. I think a lot of times you'll hear people call like 1/8 inch, like 11 gauge. So somewhere between 10 and 12, but definitely thicker than 1/8 inch. So that's your maximum nibbling capacity on this. Or if you go to aluminum, you can go to 9 gauge, which again is a little bit even more thicker than 1/8 inch. Now, this is a pretty handy little catch bag here because unlike the other one that had just like a clamp on it for the, like a spring clamp for the M12, this one actually latches specifically. So you see right here, there's a notch on here. In fact, there's a red dot right there and there's a red dot right there. So you line that up first right there and then it just clips in. Show you on this side. Got a little lip right here. Just push that and it comes off. So that unlocks. And so line up the red dot, push it down, and it clips into place. Easily remove it just like that. So now all those chips are going to fall in that bag as long as this is pointed downward because it's just using gravity to do that. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of little pieces of shrapnel laying around, and we'll show you what that looks like in a moment. Because on the M12, it had a little round head that actually cut a little crescent moons out, but this kind of tells you of what you're going to be cutting here. So that little tang sticking out is the exact size of the nibbling action. At least I think that's what that is, which looks to be a 1/4 inch, but let's grab my digital calipers and see. So here I've got my digital calipers, and let's go ahead and measure the kind of the diameter of, so it looks like 1 3/8 inches. So 1.375 as far as the size on this head. Let's measure that once more. Yeah, right at 1 3/8 inches, 1.365, 1.375. And then again, the little tang here that shows you kind of your cutting path, which is both a guide and it kind of lets you know of the width. Yeah, so 0.253, so a 1/4 inch. So it's cutting a 1/4 inch out of the metal, so make sure that you're marking that appropriately so that you know when you get done cutting, you haven't cut too much out of whatever material you're working on. Now, as far as the size of this guy, again, from the bottom to the top, right at 8 inches. And also you need at least 2 inches of clearance here for just the cutting section of this. So that's how much is going to stick down the bottom. So you're not going to be able to cut, you know, some small square tubing or rectangle tubing if you don't have a 2-inch gap in there for that head to actually run through. And as far as the length on this, 19 inches with the battery on it. And then as far as the head width, I don't know, probably 3 1/4 inches wide to give you an idea. But also on the weight, I'm not sure if I'll be able to weigh this. Yeah, I guess we can do it this way. Almost a 10-pound unit. So 9 pounds, 9 ounces. Yeah. Yeah, 9 pounds, 9 ounces. So not a small tool whatsoever. But again, we're talking about, you know, nibbling through 1/8 inch steel or 10 gauge steel. Again, we can mount our handle either way. And then sounds like we got a flywheel in there that keeps that momentum up. We know it's a fuel, so we know that it's also a brushless motor, but you hear that whine, you hear it running on for a while. And also a lot of shaking. So as that tool's running up and down, we've definitely got some weight that's exchanging in there because it wants to move this whole table. So it's not just the motor doing that work, it's obviously turning a flywheel with some weight on it to actually keep that momentum going. Again, there you see the LED lights at work as well. Now we'll get to using this in just one moment, but let me pull the battery off. And you'll see the little thumb screw right here on the, if you're holding it on the right-hand side of the tool. And if you turn this, at first you'll feel some little detents because there's a little rod that sticks through with some detents on this thumb screw. I guess that's to help it keep from backing out. But even once you get past the detents, you can feel this thing rock, but you can't really turn it. And you got to keep turning here. But don't pull up on it because you'll actually pull the pin and everything out of it. So you want to keep it loose enough to where you can turn it, but don't pull it up and out. And that's going to help you in being able to cut where you need to go, whether you're needing to pull towards you, kind of push around you, or push straight forward. And by the way, we have kind of a trailing edge right here. Now, this trailing edge is much thinner than the leading cutting edge. We know the leading cutting edge is a 1/4 inch, right? And this rear trailing edge goes from a 1/4 inch down to not even 1/10 of an inch. You're right at 1/10 of an inch. So less than half of the forward edge. Now that tells me a couple of things. Number one, it's going to free you up and kind of not get really tight as you're cutting. Number two, tells me we are going to be able to do some sort of a radius. Now, we've got a pretty broad section there, and you can see it kind of is flat and then goes to more a fadeaway, if you will, where it gets thinner. So it is going to help it keep straight, but at the same time, allow you to make some turns if you need to. I'm not sure it's going to be very tight turns at all, but it does look like we'll be able to manipulate a little bit of turning. All right, let's put our bag on. Line up the red dots. And easily clip that on. And so we have our little mark here, which let's do something. Let's draw us a little line. Now I'm just curious how well I can keep onto that line. Okay, that was interesting because I tried to kind of ease into it, and that's when it was wanting to be jumpy. But once you literally push into it and actually go to work with it, it smooths right out. So there you see the channel we made. Nice smooth cut. Again, initially I was a little wobbly because I was being too ginger with it, but once I just shoved it in, I could stay on track with my line, and it made a really straight cut. And again, very effortlessly, and hardly any heat built up in that at all. I mean, I can feel some warmth, but there's nothing that feels hot to me. It doesn't feel over 100 degrees to me. Maybe 100, maybe 100, 110, but not hot to the touch at all. I can still grab a hold of that with no problem. Again, same thing. Once you get it started, get it going, and actually shove it forward, it cuts the best with pressure behind it for sure. Again, that middle section, building a little heat in it since it got cut on both sides. So down here, I don't know, probably 110 degrees or so. So it feels warm to the touch, but by no means is it burning me. So, you know, making one cut long, I can't see a lot of heat being built up. So here's a little closer look at our cuts. We'll cut some stainless steel here in a moment. Let's see if I can. So some, you know, sharp edges there, not feeling like razor sharp, but just a little bit of a knurled edge there. But again, very little distortion, if at any. And let's take a look here. There is some heat in that bag, by the way. So obviously those little nibs there, a little bit of heat in those, which I would expect. Yeah, they're warm. So they're building heat on one another. But you can see the little nibs that it's breaking off or cutting off. I don't know, they're probably close to an 1/8 inch long, maybe. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more than a 1/16, a little less than an 1/8. So 3/32. And obviously that 1/4 inch wide. So this is some 18 gauge stainless steel. No problem with it whatsoever. Let me try something here. I'm going to try to go straight in. Now that was a lot tighter radius than I thought I was going to be able to cut, and that was no issue whatsoever cutting that, and no heat built into that. I mean, I'm feeling just the slightest amount of additional heat on that edge as to the other. Again, and there you go. I really had no line of sight and got that radius pretty close to the other. Okay, that radius there, I felt on this one here, how tight I was going. I felt it literally hitting up against the edge, so the trailing edge. So that's kind of probably the max radius or the tightest corner you could turn with this. Yeah, that was kind of bumping against the trailing edge all the way to there. But still, pretty impressed that we could make that tight of a radius with that long of a trailing edge. Okay, now I've got the max size of stainless steel, because I think they're saying 12 gauge, and this is, this might be 10 gauge stainless. Yeah, it's at least... It is 10 gauge stainless, so I'm pushing the limits on this. They're supposedly only supposed to do, this might be 8, no, it's 10 gauge stainless. So we're only supposed to do 12 gauge stainless, but we're going to give it a shot. We might ruin something, but let's see. I also got a straight line across here. I want to see how well I can stay on that, and here goes. Again, very little heat, if at all, and I stayed right on my blue line, my blue mark there. I mean, I'm dead on. I've got blue ink all the way down here, but just barely any. So pretty impressed with that I was able to stay right on that. And you can see my variance there. It's by no means perfect, but it's well in the ballpark without a straight edge. So you can do the same thing like you would a plasma torch and be able to put you down a rule and then run beside it and do an even straighter cut. But that was just free-handed with a marker drawn on there. And again, 10 gauge stainless steel. And there's my slice of pie out of the 10 gauge stainless. Okay, we've had no issue whatsoever making our cuts in our different materials. These are the niblets from the 10 gauge or 1/8 inch steel, 10 gauge steel. These are the niblets. Actually, there's some mild steel left over in here as well, with the 18 gauge stainless steel. And this is the niblets here from the 10 gauge stainless steel. And by the way, like I said, not much heat at all in the cuts. I will say there is some heat in these pieces here. And these don't fall out the easiest, but it's not a big deal. And there you have it. So yes, some heat building up in all these little spaces here when it's hanging out in the bag with one another, and they're transferring all that energy and heat to one another. But really cool concept. Love the fact that we took something from an M12 tool and now it's grown up into an 18 volt tool. And this is one of those tools that, again, I mentioned it. You know, many people are going to scoff at this. They're going to talk about the pricing I'm about to tell in a moment. They're going to talk about how expensive it is and that all those different things. But the person that sees this and sees what it could do for them, they're going to justify it or they're not. And so you're going to know whether you need a tool like this or not. If you don't know that you do, I do not recommend buying it. So this is kind of a niche tool for, you know, trailer manufacturers, HVAC, you know, industrial electricians, industrial, you know, HVAC guys, you know, doing thick duct work and cutting into things like that. And eliminating sparks from whether it be a zip wheel, whether it be a a plasma cutter, whatever. You're replacing all that flame, spark, stuff like that with something that doesn't make any spark, doesn't make any flames, and builds very little heat. Again, these little things get quite hot in the bag, but again, it's not burning me, it's just a little bit hot. So really cool tool. All right, pricing on this, $700 for the bare tool. Yeah, that's right. So no battery. You just get the tool, the little baggie, the handle for $699. Yes, it's a steep price. However, there's not a lot of tools out there, especially on the cordless platform, that can accomplish what it's doing. And by the way, I think it's doing it quite well. And I think somebody that works with one of these day in and day out will know exactly what they can put this to use for. As always, let us know in the comments if you disagree with us, or if you agree with us, or if we missed something. Also, keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. And if you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button. Have a great day and keep smiling.